We've got Carolyn Betts, founder and CEO of Betts Recruiting on here, Daniel Barber, VP of Sales at Datanyze, Kazanjy, founder of Modern Sales Salon and Talent Bin, Matt Lopez, principal at Skaled, and myself, Max Altschuler, CEO of Sales Hacker. We're going to be talking about 2017 sales trends and how to close more deals. Pretty all-star lineup. People have been doing this for quite a while, really know their stuff. And we're going to be only on audio today. We might have some slides with the questions popping up for you, but you'll only need to listen in for this webinar. But without any further delay, I'm going to kick it over to Carolyn, and she's going to get into the meat. So Carolyn, take it away.
Thanks, Max. Hi, everybody. So let's get right into it. And so what are you guys seeing are the top sales industry trends for this year, 2017, and why are they important? So let's start with Matt. Go for it, dude.
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Max. So yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, obviously getting an opportunity to work with a lot of tech companies of a number of different stages, we saw a ton of trends in 2016 that we think will continue to develop in 2017. And I'll just give one at a macro level, and then I'll give another trend at a more micro level. So, I think at a macro level, what we've definitely seen is there's just been this ongoing continuation and openness from CEOs really starting to support sales leaders. For anyone in the room who's been a VP of sales or a CRO even, it can be a difficult role. It's a volatile role, and we're starting to see CEOs just get much more hands-on in a good way. For a lot of companies, it's the highest paid person in the company, and many times the expectation as a result is that they don't deserve help or that they have to figure things out on their own. And so when targets are missed, they're usually the scapegoat. So for us, we just don't feel like that's that's right. The world of sales is evolving, as everyone in this group knows, way too quickly for really any one person to stay ahead of or really to be the expert in everything. So if you look at it, any other executive function in a business, it's almost common practice that they have additional support, to pull through top initiatives. A CMO at most companies is spending, millions of dollars on marketing agencies, whether it's for PR, content, ads, etc. So, it's no wonder why the tenure there is, almost 3x that of a VP of sales at most companies. So, I'd say at a macro, we've just started to see a much more openness at the CEO level to kind of really support the head of sales, and again, in a really good way. So that they know they have a strong person in that role. They want to make sure that they have the resources available to them to to make sure that those top initiatives happen. And then what I would say is that at a more micro level, what we started to see in 2016, and again we think it'll snowball into 2017 and really start to get implemented, is this whole idea that companies are starting to really understand, I would say, client success as a true revenue. For its true revenue potential, especially when aligned with account management. I'm sure there's plenty of people on on today's call who have seen this role function in much more of a relationship-driven way, where the main metrics are: how do we drive activation, how do we reduce churn, are we increasing renewals, and I'm not saying those are not important metrics to keep track of, but many times if they're the only levers we're pulling, it feels like we're leaving a lot of business on the table. So, my prediction is really that 2017 is the beginning of the end of really this check-in client success manager or account manager, and that we start to see much more alignment around these roles where, we're understanding that there are more levers that we can pull, and we can generate much more revenue by design as opposed to opportunistically around things like referrals and, how do we identify upsell opportunities, not for the, couple of add-on licenses, but, how do we now go map an account and identify what are the other regional offices that we should be talking to and get intros there as well. My tip here, hopefully practical advice, for anyone on the line who's building out one of these teams is, just making sure you have, people who want to be in these roles and understand that there's a sales component to them, and that it's not purely relationship driven. Otherwise, as you're, running trainings and implementing these processes, you might start to face some resistance. But definitely an interesting trend where we believe companies are going to really start to, grow exponentially, not just from top of funnel or net new business, but from the existing pipeline as well, or existing customers.
That's great, Matt. And interestingly enough, we're coming out with a compensation study, and what I've noticed is pretty significant bumps from 2015, 16 to 17 in terms of those customer success roles. So it seems like there's some alignment there in terms of more money being invested in, recruiting and hiring, more experienced talent in both sales and customer success for those roles. So that's pretty consistent with what we're seeing too. How about you, Daniel? What are you seeing over there at Datanyze?
Yeah, that was very interesting, Matt. I definitely have seen sort of that trend towards customer success and the lifetime value of customers being a focus for both the C-level and all the way up to sort of their investors of the company as well. So I think that's a general trend. I would say companies are finally understanding that like retention is a thing and measuring just the acquisition cost of bringing on a customer is important, but understanding what that actually means from an ROI perspective of all of the the individual roles in an organization. So just interesting points. Sort of seeing some similar trends, although I would say, Carolyn, looking at where I sit in the organization leading sales, prominently working with sales leaders as well as marketing leaders, really working with anyone directly that has an impact on revenue. So sometimes that can involve customer success and account management as well. So over the past sort of like 5 years or so, worked with a lot of startups from the earliest of stage, myself, all the way to large publicly traded companies, but also everything in between on the consulting side. And so what I would say, we saw very early on with Salesforce that was figured out was this idea of specialization and the idea of separating roles and the creation of individual roles. And what that meant was as we fast forwarded sort of to 2014 and 15, we started to see organizations separate out the sales function, so create individual roles that were not just full cycle sales reps, but now having SDRs and account executives, and then further specialization into separating the sales development or sort of lead generation component of the business. That started to go a little further, and I think now what we're seeing in 2017 is organizations starting to test different methods, whether that be that the inbound part of the business actually rolls up into marketing, which we're seeing. I've seen a lot of organizations moving in that direction. And then, does the outbound part of the business sort of tasked with, using a spear to steal Aaron Ross's analogy there of, do they roll up to sales, or is there a combination of the two? I also have started to see a little bit more financial rigor, which is really positive around, businesses starting to understand what the cost of actually acquiring a customer looks like. I think there is, a lot of businesses in sort of that boom time in 2014 and 13 even that invested heavily in trying to acquire customers with, probably a little lacking of foresight of what the actual cost of acquiring that customer looks like. And I think David Skok has done some amazing research in this area. I draw on one slide from him on a regular basis that I share with even sales reps can find value in this. That it's on slide 13 of a deck called Outbound Prospecting. That you really need to think about if the deal is under really $10,000. Does it make sense to have two people involved in that sales process? Meaning, does the business actually make money to do that? And so I think overall for going into this year, starting to see a little bit more sophistication and forethought put into how companies are acquiring customers and whether it actually makes financial sense to acquire companies for a deal size under $10,000. The other thing I would probably say that is starting to become well documented is this idea of like sales enablement and sales support. So there's been a few posts in this area that kind of were precursors to what we're starting to see going into this year. One was by Jason Lemkin, sort of what the first 100 hires would look like. That's one that I generally share with anyone that I meet, because I think often founders and VCs are, it's a daunting task to think about what do you hire in your first 10, 20, 30 staff. And it's a pretty good outline of what a successful organization looks like at 100 employees. But I think, what we also saw midway through point of 2016, HBR, and courtesy of a team of folks at McKinsey, came out with a post that sort of suggested that the leading organizations were investing about 50 to 60% of their sales employees into support functions. So by support functions, that can be anything from sales enablement to quasi-product marketing to sales operations. And so I think we're seeing a lot more emphasis and resources going into those areas. And finally, the C-suite really understanding the value of both business operations and as a function that supports the entire organization, but that going all the way down to sales operations as well. So I think some exciting times for folks in support roles, and generally just more rigor, I think, than we've seen before, which is definitely a move in the right direction too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Daniel. That's great insight from where you're sitting. And Pete, I'm sure you also have some thoughts on this topic as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm in a pretty fun little spot where I get to hang out with a lot of sales operations and strategy folks through modern sales. And so I think that I oftentimes really enjoy the front row seat I get to have with respect to kind of technology and also excellence of process. And I think that that's something that we're going to see continue in 2017 as well. Like, first, I think we'll continue to see more automation, but in a smart way. Probably going from, I think, with a lot of the email automation functionality that has kind of come online for individual reps, the outreaches and sales lofts and Novas and Persist IQs of the world. I think what we'll probably see is the continued adoption of that. But then also I feel that some of the early adoption of that has kind of been like giving a machine gun to a kindergartner. And I think what we're going to see is the evolution of that into a smarter adoption of that. So I think that's something we'll continue to see there, simply insofar as it's very powerful, especially when applied in a smart fashion as opposed to just kind of a spray and pray sort of fashion. And I think related to that will be this notion of organizations getting even more analytically excellent. I think that the more activity that you have going on that is instrumented and flowing into the CRM, the better and smarter you can be around understanding if that activity is value positive, where it's value positive, where it's not value positive, to kind of echo Daniel's point about getting more financially intelligent. There's a precursor to financial intelligence of understanding cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value, what have you, which is understanding how the individual actions of sales reps, whether SDRs or AEs or CSMs or AMs or what have you, how those actions then flow into value for the business. And so the more instrumented you are, the better you can, and the more that activity is happening in systems that can flow into a place where it can be asked questions, the better you can get there. And so I think that there's a virtuous cycle going on there where this activity is being housed such that it can be instrumented, and then that information can be fed back to management and line management, leadership, and even individual reps, so they can redirect their activities in the highest output fashion. So if you have response rate information being pushed to individual reps so they understand that, for instance, that most recent outreach campaign that they were executing really kind of sucks as compared to the ones that the other folks in their organization are doing, they can quickly adjust as opposed to continuing to spend a month sending a useless and not performant drip campaign. So I think you'll see that, and that's kind of like I like to separate analytics of a more traditional approach, like I was kind of talking about, from artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like that. I think they're kind of related, but I think that what we'll see quite a bit here is the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning to analytics of a sort that you previously was very difficult to do. And specifically, that's kind of like analytics that can help you instrument the quality of activity, of selling activity, as opposed to kind of the quantity. Like we're all used to understanding, okay, great, make more calls or send more emails or what have you, and that's obviously quantity behavior, or create more opportunities or have more meetings. And then of course there's versions of analytics that can help you converge on quality instrumentation, like things like response rate might be a good example of that, or win rate, or stock opportunities, or things like that. But those are kind of like numeric signifiers of quality. Whereas now, as a result of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the sort of quality instrumentation that might have previously taken like a sales manager listening in on a call or being CC'd on an email in order to read the email, now some of that stuff can be done by a machine in order to catch out, even if it's just something as basic as like grammatical errors in emails that are going out, or there's a lot of call recording software and parsing software, like there's a company called Chorus, ExecVision, Gong, etc., that can listen in on a call and real time, as the rep is discussing with the client, understand, okay, great, your talk listen time is way off. You're not asking open-ended questions, the sort of thing that a sales manager traditionally would have to sit in on in order to do. But if you're a sales manager and you have 10 reps, unfortunately you can only do that with 1 rep at a time. So I think that we're going to see more and more of that artificial intelligence and machine learning come in to help with quality instrumentation. So I think those are kind of like the big, like a smarter sales organization that makes more use of data, but makes more use of data in ways that previously haven't really been all that terribly easy to access.
Great. Thank you, Pete. I really love all these insights, and I definitely, from my seat, have been noticing a lot of the specialization, and a couple of things that we've noticed are, the delineation between inexperienced SDRs and experienced SDRs, as Daniel spoke a little bit about, whether we have and the different strategy where different companies had different theories, and now we're really seeing it being 2 totally separate roles where, inbound SDRs, people are pretty open to people right out of school, a much lower salary range, as opposed to the experienced ones that are going to be, more of an account-based approach, reaching out to more senior people with, a lot more polished communication, as opposed to, taking a risk on hiring people without a lot of experience. And also, there's been a new role in, at Vets Recruiting, we have a division of people that specialize in marketers and, commonly demand gen content product. And we have a number of companies this year that have asked us specifically to find them account-based marketers. And it's a new title that has come out in along with this specialization. So those are definitely trends that we're seeing over here as well. So good stuff, guys. Let's move on. So what is going to be top of mind for high growth startups in 2017, and how have sales, marketing, and customer success roles adapted to meet these needs? So Pete, I know one thing that you talked about before this was process. If you could expand on that for me, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, totally. I think that, high growth is really kind of the key there. And it's a combination of what you were just saying, Carolyn, and then also what Daniel was saying earlier, which is, I think the fundraising environment is not is not okay with quote unquote sloppy growth anymore. And I think the interesting, and by sloppy growth, what I mean by that is, hey, let's just throw an army of reps at this, and they'll figure it out, right? And if we have to fire 50% of them, like whatever. Like, I think that might be a more old school way of thinking about hiring and onboarding. But one, if you 50% of those don't end up making it, and then another 25% of those have longer ramps than they need to have, well, now you're paying base salaries on not as much contribution margin from those SDRs or AEs or customer success people, and that's not great, because the opposite case of bringing folks on, getting them to success, and getting them to success very rapidly, such that that account executive that costs you, $10,000 a month is in month 2 contributing and $50,000 of bookings, $30,000 of which are in cash. Immediately, that's a way more powerful way of running your sales organization. So I think that those organizations, this is related to the thing that Daniel and I were talking about analytics, is being process excellent at bringing on reps, getting them to success, making sure that they have targets to shoot at, making sure that they are delivering their presentations the way they need to be doing. If you're SDRs, instead of handing them an empty book of business, they have 200 accounts or 300 accounts to start working immediately without having to waste time going and building those lists initially. They can just, because sales operations or marketing operations or enablement has already put that in place, they're ready to hit the ground running. I think that that's something that there's lots of upside to there's lots of upside to organizations, because you can build more market capitalization and more enterprise value in your organization with less venture capital. And then the flip side, of course, is so that's the upside. The guarding against the downside is, if you don't get to cash flow positivity, or you can't, or it's unclear, you're going to be in a much worse position to raise more money there. So I think that the process excellence of managing a sales organization also extends to the process excellence of hiring in the sales organization, making sure that people are going to be the right fits and have the skill profile that is required in order to have success, and match your existing success profiles of your most successful folks, bringing them on and getting them to success, and then instrumenting your reps along the way to make sure that they are tracking to success. So if they're not, you can jump on that fire very quickly, and or alternatively adjust your onboarding and your hiring profile to make sure that you're not bringing on folks that are not going to get to success.
Thanks, Pete. And we've definitely seen that as well, with a little bit of righting the ship in terms of sales, hiring, and I think there was a theory out there for a while where if I just add additional headcount and put X amount of quota on everyone's, on top of each hire, this is going to equal my revenue. And people pretty quickly found out that that was not the case, and there was a lot more that that equaled the success other than just butts in seats with quotas attached to them. So that's something that we've been seeing as well, a lot more strategic hiring and a lot of investment, as Daniel said, to his point, of the sales enablement and making people sure they have the tools to be successful in those roles. So that's great. How about you, Matt? Want to weigh in here?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, things that I'll just quickly comment on, areas that I think, high growth companies should just be mindful of in this year is really, one, personalization. I think we hear a lot about it, via different products that, some of which were touched on earlier, where, whether it's machine learning or, real-time insights into what our accounts or, the people that, are in our patch are doing on a day-to-day basis. But, I think it's just going to be an area that continues to need to become like a core part of both, everything from the sales process to the lead generation process. And, I think the buyer is just ultimately getting more savvy. If we all think back to what bulk email, the conversion rates on bulk emails looked like in 2015, maybe the beginning of 2016, I just don't think it's the same today. I think the buyers changed, and they may feel like they're maybe it's more spam than anything before. So now, more than anything. So now I think we're just going to start to see and have to see high growth companies really start to think about how does personalization become core to everything we're doing in sales and lead generation and customer success. As the buyer has just evolved, and we have to step up our game as well. So Pete talked earlier on this on sort of avoiding the spray and pray approach and ABM, and I think that's just a really good example of the direction a lot of companies are going in today, where we've even worked at Skaled with companies where bulk email automation worked really well for a period of time, and over time those conversion rates changed, and they've had to go with more of an account-based approach, and that's worked really well for them. And I know, Carolyn, you talked about this idea of, as part of that evolution, now we're starting to see new roles pop up, whether it's the ABM marketer, which I know we've worked on projects with Bets in the past, where that's been a key hire for their organization to really start to ensure that this level of personalization is happening. The other trend, I would say, area that I've seen high growth startups start to make a focal point, on their sales floors, just this level of standardization. So again, Pete kind of talked about process excellence and using technology to for quality assurance. I see that for a lot of companies who are growing extremely quickly, they start off with what feels like a very tight sales process. Everyone feels good about it. The CEO feels good about it. The VP of sales feels good about it, and we start hiring tons of people. And you look at the floor, you look at the process 6-12 months later, when the team has doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and you do an audit, and it's pretty clear that the process and the quality has sort of dropped quite a bit. And so you can imagine as a CEO what happens as you start to really build out that team to a point where you can't meet with every salesperson on a daily basis, or you start to build out the UK office or the California office or the New York office, and you really can't get in front of what's happening on front line on a day-to-day basis. So I think those are just two areas that for companies that are growing extremely quickly in 2017, it's going to be key to making sure that the work that they're putting in today ultimately is preserved, and they continue to grow at an effective rate.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So we're coming up to 11:30 right now, and I know we want to have some time for Q&A. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll move on to that. So the last one that we thought was interesting for everybody to discuss is what new roles and skills are going to become more important in the pre- and post-sales process in 2017. And I know people have spoken to this. Obviously, the account-based marketer is something that came up, delineation between further inbound, outbound, a greater importance on customer success, and also increasing the sales part of that role. What else are you guys seeing? Obviously, we don't want to repeat everything we just said. So Daniel, anything else there that you're seeing that you'd like to mention to the folks on the phone here?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting, I think there's some common themes we're seeing across all of the responses, right? So, Pete, Matt, sort of confirming investment in, companies for the long haul, right? Thinking about customer acquisition, not just as your first year, but, everything after that. So that's led to this movement, and I think you're seeing it with some of the leaders in the space, like Gainsight and Tatango and so forth, being sort of out there pushing the idea of customer success. I think this is really the same thing that's happened in sales specialization. It's now just moved into the customer side. I think traditionally, there was this concept of account management, and so just as it sounds, you manage the accounts. But that then formed and morphed into this idea of customer success. For some companies, I think really they just changed the way it was described. So success sounds better than managing. But I think they are actually, there's actually 3 roles that are existing in sort of some of the leading companies within especially within the technology sort of sector. And that is you have customer support, customer success, and account management. And so, there is delineation between those respective roles. And, thinking about what they sort of defined as, so customer support being fairly reactionary, very end user driven, responding to the needs of the end user if there is a challenge or a ticket submitted. Customer success focused on onboarding, ongoing training of the broader organization. That does include decision makers who are using the technology or the product or service. And then account management focused generally on the monetary decision makers in the business and having ongoing economic conversations with those individuals to ensure that across the organization everyone's getting access, and if there is any more potential for value, mutual value between the two organizations, that actually is happening. So I think the traditional model, and I can say I've seen this firsthand at now really like 3 or 4 companies. The idea of account management is somewhat flawed when the account executive owns the customers. And while it's a nice idea to have the account executive own all economic discussions, the challenge that happens with this is that as you have successful account executives and they've closed 40, 50, 60, 100 customers, maintaining and having focus on upsells and cross-sells and just generally expanding the business relationship between the two entities is really challenging. So I think we're seeing the need to have really all 3 roles. And I would just sort of add with that, we're sort of evolving our comp plans here at Datanyze, and I think a lot of organizations are doing the same thing at this time of the year. And so working with our sales enablement folks, I focused really on making sure we have a separation of focus. So I bucketed that focus into sort of what I would describe as management systems, and then process improvements, and then technology innovations. So essentially you have PI, MS, and then TI. And so those 3 things are then giving focus to organizations so that they can not just look to technology as a crux to solve all problems, or not looking at process to solve all problems, rather trying to bucket in an importance versus urgency map, so that you are actually looking at the optimal customer experience, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, we definitely want to leave some time for people to ask some questions here. So, hey, Max, do you want to go ahead and open that up to the folks online here?
Yes, definitely. So we've got quite a few questions here, throughout the entire thing. So people want to actually know more about commissions. So can we talk a little bit more? I think it's the first question that we dove into here. We could talk a little bit more about kind of how commissions are structured with some of these roles, and what those trends look like, because there are a couple questions here involving commissions.
Yeah,
Carolyn,
absolutely. Yeah.
Do you
So
want to pick that up?
I'll start, but we are coming out with a compensation study, basically, where we take all of our hundreds of companies that we've worked with over the past few years and put together trends that we're seeing, and so I don't necessarily really want to speak to how there's so many different ways that companies structure these things, whether and for all the different levels of between SDRs or BDRs, account executives, etc. But you guys stay tuned, and you'll see that study that'll be a lot more data aggregated between all of the companies that we've recruited for. So I think that'll be some good information. And I think there might be some Matt or Pete, Daniel might be better able to discuss how they've structured their comp plans, or how they're seeing other companies structure them more specifically for 2017.
And more specifically, it looks like it came from Pete's section where he was talking about kind of the sales operation role and how that drives outcomes for SDRs, AEs, everybody else. Pete, you want to go into that a little bit more on how you compensate your sales operations team?
Sure. I mean, I think there's two things there. First, probably the folks that are on the webinar right now are interested in what trends are looking like for commissions for individual sellers and SDRs, things like that. I think one of the things that I've seen that is changing substantially is as organizations become more process excellent and more analytical, they understand exactly how long a ramp should actually be, and because they have a good instrumentation of their sales cycle and they know what the average deal tempo is, and because they know that they're providing opportunities to their AEs or because they're providing accounts ready to go to the SDRs, ramp kind of draw compensation is being shortened, mainly because if you think about what draw is used for, is it's used to reduce the risk associated with starting up a new book of business, but it's something that the entire organization has to give to everybody in the sales organization, not just the people who are kind of killing the most for the business. So I think because analytics are getting better there, you're seeing people get crisper faster on those ramps, both for SDRs and for AEs, using the actual data from the existing sellers in the organization or existing SDRs in the organization. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it keying off of what Matt and Daniel were saying about customer success becoming more important and thinking the lifetime value of customers becoming more of a focus in a SaaS environment. And Carolyn was talking about how she's seeing customer success and sales engineer compensations bump up there to reflect that ongoing importance. I think what you also are seeing is parts of compensation are being tied to that ongoing success of clients that are closed. So it's not sufficient just to get them across the line or sell bad deals. Those are starting to show up more and more in commissions, specifically commissions, either kickers for renewals, like AEs having opportunities to participate in upside later on, and also downside. So if you sell a bad deal that churns out quickly, then there's implications associated with that. So I think that's some of the big kind of operations centric things that are impacting commissions there.
Awesome. Thank you for the detailed answer. We'll keep moving on with some of these questions as we got quite a few. But one that I'm going to add kind of like my own touch to that's coming in right here is, and I'll start with Daniel maybe first on this, but overcoming objections. So can you address your thoughts on outbound communication, the role of overcoming objections in today's sales conversations? In other words, should we try to overcome the objections to book the meeting at all costs, or really just attempt to find prospects who are genuinely interested in our product? Daniel, any thoughts on that? And like to kind of go a step further, how are you going out and finding people who are the right fit and making sure you're not wasting time on accounts that are maybe only like a 20% to close? Are you using any predictive software? Are you kind of eating your own dog food? What does that process look like?
Yeah, great question. Just to level set on objections, I have a great post that I used for a couple teams now, which is like, don't handle objections, steer them. So if you think about objections, and I'll just kind of like give you the cliff notes, although I definitely recommend checking it out. There's really like 5. So one is not the right time. One is we're using your competitor. The general bucketed of like not interested, or there's no budget, or it's not the right person. Those 5 objections pretty much encompass like 90% of objections. So if you think about those objections, you can really put them in a matrix of they are an emotional or rational objection, or they're irrelevant or they're relevant. So honestly, the objections that you want are rational, relevant objections, meaning they're price related or they're product related, and you just have to work out how you can teach someone about the product. So definitely check out that post just at a macro level. Being specific to answer your sort of second question of how to ensure that you reduce the amount of objections that you actually even receive. The concept of pre-qualifying your accounts is definitely something that I have been promoting. I would argue that we have actually been promoting, you and I have been promoting for quite a long time. The idea that investing in understanding an organization's technology choices will ensure that you're not just having conversations with companies that perhaps now have 500 employees, and last week they had 495. And then therefore they're now in your territory and should be a qualified account. We have a lot of technology out there that surfaces and can surface whether someone's actually in a buying pattern or at least has budget. So getting the question or getting the response that there's absolutely no way that we're ever going to use your service, I would go back to your sales ops team or sales enablement team and ask, why am I working this account? But as I said, generally objections are one of those 5 that I mentioned earlier. And really the best reps I've seen out there are able to steer the objection. You're not handling them. Rather, you're steering them in a place that eventually ends up delivering value. So hopefully that was helpful.
It would be great if you could either share the link in the chat on the GoToWebinar or tweet it from Kazanjy Dan. Is that the tweet? Yeah.
That's
a couple of people asking for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll happy to share that.
Okay, a couple of people asking for that. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm consistently seeing a lot of these companies that are building predictive for these types of things, so that reps aren't working on deals that should have been started in the. I'm sure, Pete, you're looking at a lot of technology as well. You're probably seeing the same stuff. But we'll keep moving on here, and kind of a question for everyone. A ton of conversation around automation filling jobs in the workforce. I myself think this is more of like a manufacturing thing than it is a sales thing, because I believe automation kind of supports the sales rep, not replaces them. But I'm kind of curious to get everybody's opinion on that. I think we've got a couple questions around that, so everybody else is as well. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you're working with a lot of companies. What are you seeing?
Just to clarify, is the question on how automation gets built into the sales process and whether it's a replacement for salespeople?
Yeah, are you seeing it replace employees at all, or is it still something that's more supportive? I mean, how are you seeing companies adopt it?
Yeah, there was an interesting statistic on this. I think Gartner published it. I may be wrong, but it was something to the effect of by 2020, I think 80% of the sales process will be managed by technology. And what I would say is, at initial glance, that can be a pretty terrifying statistic for a lot of salespeople who are thinking about how does this impact their career over the next obviously 3 years. But as I had more time to think about it, I don't personally believe that there's ever going to be a period where technology completely replaces the need for salespeople. What I've seen more so than anything is technology is if you look at sales tech, I mean, marketing tech has exploded, many years, before today, but really over the last 3 and 5 years, I'd say sales tech is like starting to become a much more crowded space than it was, circa 5 years ago, let's just say. And so, I don't believe that sales technology and automation is going to replace people. I think it's going to change the type of person that's going to, that'll ultimately fill that sales role. And so, an example of this might be, we've talked about how there's more, analytics available, and there's tools like Datanyze, there's tools like Insight Squared. I don't see those, or even email automation, call automation, I don't see those replacing people. I see, giving salespeople the opportunity to develop different skills, right? Instead of being the relationship builder, you need to come with a more analytical mindset as well. Instead of, again, being the guy who's playing golf 2 times a week, you're probably coming with more of the project management skill set, because you're not just managing a complex sales process, but you may be also managing, 2 or 3 different pieces of complex technology that are going to, make you more efficient. So, the world I see in 2020 is much less one that's, entirely driven by technology, and instead, one where, salespeople are just, equipped like the Terminator, where they have, very complex systems that are, intertwined and integrated seamlessly, and, they can just work at a much higher level of efficiency, than was once possible.
Yeah. And Carolyn, obviously you have quite an interesting point of view in the recruiting space. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. These tools are not meant to replace the salesperson, and it's just about increasing efficiency, transparency. As Pete mentioned earlier with the artificial intelligence tools, those are things that we're seeing, with Chorus, Gong, et cetera, Exec Vision. I think that's a big theme that I'm seeing to help increase the skill set of the sales reps out there. We also do a lot of work with some of these sales tools to help them build their teams, and that is not the intention of these technologies at all to replace salespeople, but more to make them better at their jobs. And what I'm seeing here, because obviously our recruiters are outbound salespeople as well that try and hunt down relevant candidates for our client companies. The top performing people on my team are the ones that best use these tools to better manage their time. There's a tool where there's a video that you can do of yourself and send it out to people, and that's the top person here use that very effectively. Outreach, putting together personalized sequences to various different candidates that we're trying to keep on their radar for if they were to make a move. So I think that it's definitely increasing the skill set and efficiency for sales reps as opposed to replacing them.
Yeah, I agree. We see these articles all the time popping up, and they're on kind of more national or global levels, and I think it has a lot more to do with maybe manufacturing businesses and things like that, but definitely not in sales. People buy from people, and a lot of this technology is going to help salespeople if they adopt it the right way and quickly. So anything to add? Yeah.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to add there. I think the other cool thing about this is that what we need to consider is that oftentimes the price of a solution that's being sold is tied to how difficult it is to take to market. And so I think that Daniel was mentioning that earlier when he was saying, like, hey, sometimes if something costs, if something's below $10,000, you can't necessarily, does it make sense to have 2 people involved in it or what have you? Well, through this efficiency gains of email automation or call automation or things like that, we're kind of driving down the cost of acquisition, because if a given rep can close more deals more quickly, now all of a sudden you can maybe sell direct things that you might not have been able to sell direct previously. And so that's actually a really fascinating thing to see, the ACVs that can be supported from a direct sales model there. So it does make things more efficient at the top end and maybe even lowers prices a little bit there. But it also allows sales and sales management to make it into the realm of places that traditionally maybe weren't able to be sold directly, or alternatively had to be priced in such a way that they couldn't access huge swaths of the SMB and mid-market.
Makes sense. Okay, well, we're running out of time here. Carolyn, anything you wanna wrap up with?
No, I think we're good, and I really enjoyed having this conversation with you guys. I think some great insights and trends, and I love just knowing that we're all seeing the same things and that these themes are great for the rest of the community to be aware of.
Yeah, great conversation, everyone. Thank you so much for participating If you want to catch the recording, it'll be up in the next, I think, 48 hours on saleshacker.com. So go there. We'll put up all the links that you requested and the Twitter handles as well. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Max. Thanks.
Thanks,
Max.
Max.